National parks are beautiful places, and honestly one of my favorite places to go. I try to go there at least once a week to my local national forest. I've been doing this thing where I come in with a trash bag and I come out with a trash bag full of trash. Luckily, seems in my area I don't have to do that too much anymore. But if you guys see trash in your area, maybe start practicing that. It helps clean it up real quick. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it be from a national forest or somewhere else, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Now, without any more hesitation, let's get into these creepy, allegedly true, national forest stories that'll freak you out. In 2002, in mid-September, I and a friend of mine were looking for Native American artifacts in the Homoshido National Forest in southwest Mississippi. It was approximately 2 in the afternoon, so we pulled into a small gravel road, then turned on to a smaller logging road, which we traveled about a mile down before we parked. We walked down the small logging road for about a mile and a half, that ended suddenly and turned into a smaller trail. We traveled down this trail for about a half a mile and we were 2 miles from the car when we come to a little hump in the trail. As soon as we reached the top of the hump in the trail, it's like the forest came alive all of a sudden. Somewhere around 30 feet all around us, pine trees as big as 5 inches in diameter were shaken violently. Half of the creatures were howling like apes, orangutans, and the other half were growling almost like horrible growls, like maybe like a pack of wolves would sound. As soon as the tree was shaking and hooping and growling, I turned back to the direction we had come because I thought they were sneaking up from behind us. A couple of seconds after I turned around, I felt something at my feet. It was from my friend. He had collapsed from fear and wrapped himself around my legs, and his exact words were, I quote, "Oh God, I pray to you don't let them eat me. I pray to you to let me see my wife again." A second later, I grabbed him by his collar and told him to stand up, to be back to back with me, and let's hold this hill. Keep in mind that the trees shaking and hooping and growling were still happening. We both had 7-inch flathead screwdrivers that we used for digging up artifacts out of the soil, and walking sticks that we were holding onto for dear life. The tree shaking and hooping and growling lasted for at least 5 more minutes. Then it was like someone turned a light switch off. Everything went dead silent except for a dog that miles away was barking constantly. So we stood there for at least 30 minutes and didn't hear anything walking towards us or away from us. So I said, we need to take a break for the car. So we start walking back up at a good pace, not running, but with my friend in front so he can't stop us next time. Suddenly, he stops and I run into him. I ask him why the hell is he stopping. He couldn't speak. All he could do was point to the ground. When I saw what he was looking at, it was a perfect footprint. So I lay my walking stick beside it and put a small piece of black tape to the side of it to take a measurement of the footprint, which measured 22 inches. When I looked up after maybe 30 seconds, my friend was gone. I was still a good half mile from the car, so I ran so fast that I could feel the wind whistling by my ears. When I came around the last curve, I heard the car crank. The sound relieved me at first, but the thought of him leaving me hit me. Just then he floored the gas and spun around and the passenger door flew open. In full sprint I dove into the car and he floored it again. He spun the tires until we reached the pavement. We stopped there to gather ourselves and finally, I asked him, what did it sound like to him? He replied the hoops sounded like monkeys. So I asked him, did he see anything? And he just had this blank stare and wouldn't give me a straight answer. My friend moved from southwest Mississippi to Oklahoma about a month later, and when he comes to visit me, about 2 years later, I grilled him about what he saw. He finally admitted that what he saw was a 9 to 10 foot tall reddish-orange furry creature, with shoulders 5 foot wide at least. He said he only saw one of them, but there must have been a lot more because all the trees around us were whipping back and forth. I could hear the fear in his voice as he said this, and I could also hear them all around us, so there had to be more than one. If I wouldn't have turned around when it started, I may have seen it too, but fortunately, I didn't see it. I spent my whole life in the woods hunting, fishing, and camping. Now I can't get out of sight of a major roadway without having a panic attack. My friend has since passed, rest his soul, but I tell this in dedication to him. This is something I will never forget and go to my grave telling anyone who asks that this did happen. First off, I love the channel. I listen to it almost every single day. I've been meaning to share this on the show for a while. 2 or 3 years ago, sometime close to the end of high school, 2 friends and I decided to go exploring a local national forest. One friend, who I'll call S, knew of an area of the woods that nobody ever went to. My other friend, C, agreed it sounded fun. Of course, being high school kids, we wanted to go out at night with flashlights and explore deep within the woods. Obviously, hoping to get scared or something. We carpooled and got there at around 10 p.m. It was pitch black out, and we were far, far away from any civilization. We got out of the car, pulled our flashlights out, and got to walking. I showed S my phone, which had a sound clip of a predator, to try to scare my friend C. I played it a couple of times and he said, "Ha ha, so funny." This predator sound will come back later in the story to haunt me. We explored around longer, not getting scared by anything other than our own paranoia. We eventually came to a clearing of sorts, and my friend S pulls out a very large firecracker. Of course, your boys were excited to throw an explosive off into the woods for fun, which is not smart, obviously. He lit it and threw it into the woods. A very large boom sounded off in every direction. We laughed for a few seconds until we heard something move towards us in the direction that we threw the firecracker. Next, we heard the same sound that played in that Predator sound video earlier. Exactly like it sounds in those Predator movies. We looked at each other and quickly sprinted off towards where we knew we parked. We didn't stop until we saw the car, and walked the rest of the way, trying to calm down and make sense of what we heard. Either way, we didn't want to go back out there. There's no way in hell we were going to go back out there. You couldn't pay me. We were about to get in the car and head home when we looked back into the woods. We saw 2 eyes in the reflection of our flashlights, except they were at least 8 or 9 feet tall in the air, and way too far apart to be a squirrel in a tree. Needless to say, we booked it out of there. For years, I thought nothing of it until I started getting into skinwalker stories on your channel. Once I realized how many stories sound similar to what we saw, I was more and more convinced that it was a skinwalker or maybe a Wendigo. I started to even wonder, what maybe caused that thing to get to us that night? Maybe did we just disturb it, or maybe did our noise attract it? The area we explored was in southern Indiana, and I'd love to hear any ideas of what it is that we might have heard. Thanks for sharing my story, Swamp, even though it was kind of short. For some backstory, this happened in July of 2008, when I was doing a road trip across some southern states. I had a couple of weeks before I would begin university, and I had just moved from a breakup, so I decided to go on a solo road trip before summer break ended. My plan was to begin in Nashville, Tennessee, maybe camp at some national parks in Alabama, go to a beach or 2 in Florida, and then finish off with Baton Rouge, Louisiana. At this point in the trip, I was in Alabama. The first national park I intended to go in was in Alabama, and it was the Bankhead National Forest, which, if you've ever seen it on a map or in person, you know is a fairly big and desolate forest. But I liked it that way, because I don't get to see a whole lot of genuine nature where I live. Anyways, I get to the National Forest at around mid-morning, so between 9 and 11 a.m. I basically do all the stuff that a nature-loving person would do at a national forest, like hiking, fishing, etc. At around 7 p.m. or so, it starts getting dark, so I find a camping area and begin pitching up my tent for the night. When looking around, I noticed that there were only 2 other tents in the whole camping area, one of which packed up and left right as I arrived. In the slight brightness from the setting sun, I see the silhouette of a person sitting up in the single remaining tent, not even moving an inch. This gave me the impression that they were staring at me, but I just didn't pay any mind to it and continued on making my tent. It's right when I sit down in front of the fire that I had made that I truly take in how quiet it was outside. Considering that for all I knew, it was just me and the other person in the whole entire camping area. There just wasn't that much sound from any wildlife either, which made me a little unnerved. As time passed, I realized my firewood stash was dwindling, so I went into the surrounding tree line with my flashlight to get some more. I guess I got carried away because before I knew it, I was a couple of 100 feet into the tree line, a little ways away from the camping area. As I began to walk back, I realized it wasn't the same path I originally took, as where I was walking would bring me right to the other person's tent. I turned off my flashlight as to not startle whoever was in there and started walking by the tent, but not too close. At this point, my eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and when I walked near the person's tent, I took a glance, and what I saw made me completely unnerved. In the moonlight, I saw the person sitting there straight up in the tent, just as I saw when I first saw it a couple of hours earlier, not moving an inch, not making a sound at all. I wasn't close enough to make out exact features, but close enough to confirm that this was a human being, and not a pile of equipment or something. Keep in mind that the surrounding nature was quiet beforehand, so if this person had previously lied down and then sat up, I would have been able to hear it. The only explanation I could think of would be that this person had literally been sitting there, in their tent, motionless for hours because I never heard anything come from this tent since I arrived. I took this all in as I was walking by the tent. I never stopped or even looked back. When I got to my campsite, I called it a night right then and there, dunked water on my fire, and went to bed. I was laying there, asking questions like, did the car that left right when I came here have something to do with this? And, semi-jokingly, is this guy a drug addict who's trying to rob me in my sleep? A lot of weird things ran through my head that night. Then I fell asleep. I woke up around a couple of hours later, not sure what at first woke me, since I had almost left my mind. I almost began to sit up in my sleeping bag but caught myself when I saw that same person from before sitting a couple inches away from my tent. I had to try extremely hard to both keep quiet and not have a heart attack right then and there. The person just stood there, absolutely motionless as before, with their shadow casting across my tent. I closed my eyes, blinking away my fearful tears, hoping for whoever this was to go away, but the person just stayed there, looking into my tent. At this point, I prayed to God that they never noticed that I had woken up. I don't know when, but eventually I had fallen back asleep and woke up just when the sun was rising. I opened my eyes for a brief moment, just enough for confirmation that there wasn't anyone at my tent. I would lay there for at least another 15 minutes, still fearful that he was there. I was so confused on who this person could be and why they would be so close to my tent. But eventually, I mustered up enough courage to zip open my tent. I took a quick glance at the other campsite, and the tent was still there, but its flap was open. From where I was looking, no one was inside. The person was still out there somewhere, probably watching me for all I knew. I didn't try to disassemble my tent as I just took out all the stakes. I stuffed the whole thing into my trunk and started to book it out of there. I was basically trying to break a record is what it looked like. When I was getting to my car door, however, I stopped and I saw the words, "You shouldn't cry," It was finger-drawn in the sheen of the dirt on my driver's side window. Questions still come to my mind every once in a while about the whole thing. I saw some guy leaving in a car soon after I got to the camping area. Did he have any connections to this person? How was the person standing so perfectly still, but at the same time felt like they could attack me at any second? Was it just some hillbilly trying to scare some single guy they didn't even know? It was 11 years ago, so I'll probably never know, but I still think about it sometimes and it creeps the crap out of me. First, I'm gonna say I'm not really a believer or a skeptic. I don't know how to describe myself. I try to find scientific explanations for things while keeping in mind it could very well be something crazy. I can't really call it anything but nuts. I am an avid hiker and hunter. No, this isn't a skinwalker story. I like to go into the woods of the Daniel Boone National Forest for days at a time and camp, hunt, and fish. I went into the forest off the beaten path as per my usual MO, and went searching for a nice place near a creek with plenty of room to set up a camp. I had my survival gear, rifle, and camping supplies as always. I had a friend with me as well, but he wasn't around when I ran into whatever the heck this thing was. Roughly around 3 days ago, we were sick of fish, so I went to grab some squirrels, seeing as how they were the only thing in season. I'm not gonna BS you about hunting squirrels with a big gun. All I had was my .22 and my knife. I got about 30 minutes from camp, so I was well out of sight and earshot from my friend. I get to a nice wooded area and set up shop on a stump. The first sign something was up was there was no sound anywhere. No squirrels, no birds, nothing. The second sign was that the sky was darkening. A big storm was blowing in. If you live in Kentucky, you know the one. The big lightning storm from a few weeks back. This is the storm I am talking about. This was my cue to go. I started the trek to camp. I was making good time when I saw whatever this thing was. It was crawling low to the ground, about maybe 100 yards or so in front of me. My first thought was this was some kind of bear, but then it stood up. Not on all fours or on 2 legs. It had 6 limbs. It looked like it had 2 arms and 4 legs. Then it ran so quick that it was out of view in just a few seconds. Pretty freaky considering it was the middle of day during a storm. There's a pretty distinct chance I was seeing things, but I'm just not sure. I told my friend about it and he got uneasy and suggested we leave. He's a bona fide Appalachian mountain man, so you bet your bum as soon as the storm cleared we cleaned up camp and left. Any ideas on what this big fella was? Let me know please in the comments. This has left me feeling extremely shook, and I'd love some opinions, especially from someone with experience, so this seems to be the perfect show to share this on. Last year, I had a very strange experience in a national forest out in California. I was by myself on a road trip with my dog, and I was driving pretty far into the Mendocino National Forest. I like to camp in national parks and forests because it's isolated, so my dog can roam, free of charge. It's a trade-off for sketchy rough drives into the park sometimes and a lack of service or assistance. Anyway, I was driving up this dirt road, kind of curling up to a mountain maybe around 5 p.m. It was very nice out, sunny and warm with a slight breeze. Nothing serious happened, but I felt extremely uncomfortable driving into this area for some reason, and that feeling just did not seem to let up. Driving up the mountain, I felt like I shouldn't stay there, and I even texted my boyfriend about it for as long as I could before my phone completely lost service. I was looking for a sign of another person having been around the area lately, but it seems that I couldn't find anything. I pulled over and got out of my car with my dog to look over the edge and noticed a dead squirrel and some broken glass mixed with the dirt and the gravel road. Yucca, my dog, starts to growl slightly. She is vocal, but I've always only seen her growl only at like other dogs. I did not ever see her growl at anything random like this. I mean, I guess I have seen her growl at a possum once or twice, but I don't know. It was just out of character for her. Maybe she smelled something. This place continued to make me feel quite on edge, but I prided myself on being an independent traveler and backpacker, so I decided to continue at least a bit further with my grumbling pup to see if I could find a good place to camp. I continued to notice more dead animals. Keep in mind, no one is going to be going more than 5 to 10 miles per hour up this thing, and that's if there's anyone even there. I hear what sounds like men's voices. They sound close, and I think I should call out to them. So I stop my car, but then kind of freeze up and feel like I shouldn't. I can't really make out what they're saying. I don't see any sign of people anywhere, and I get back in my car and continue to slowly drive forward and cautiously look up from where the voices would be coming from to try to see if I can see anyone. Personally, I've never run into other people in a national park or forest when I've gone this deep in. This unsettling feeling grows about the voices, which have sort of come and gone a few times, and I give up and began to turn my car around. I honestly don't remember how Yucca was acting on the way down. I was scared and focused on getting out of there. I just distinctly remember being surprised at her grumbling when we were standing outside of my car. Kind of dangerously quickly, I went back down the mountain not seeing any sign of anyone. I decided to spring for luxury and get a hotel for the night. I figured I was just fine. Huge and open spaces can be intimidating, I told myself, and the voices could have been echoing from somewhere far off and they just sounded close. Animals die, glass gets broken, nothing happened, cool. But I remember this place and it sticks with me. Whenever I'm watching scary movies, if I'm walking my dog in the woods at night, nothing compares to the feeling I had driving up that mountain, and it's honestly kind of interesting to me as well. I recently happened across some information as well as some Native American lore that made me feel extremely uneasy. Fast forward a year. I've mentioned this place to a few people and the haunting vibes it gave, but nothing much more. I googled the national park once and didn't really find anything of note, but didn't look much either. I like scary movies and things of that nature, hence my fascination in this little event. So my boyfriend and I were coming up on finishing our road trip just yesterday. We were in Wyoming for a wedding. There were only 2 to 3 hours left, and the sun had set, so we decided to listen to some scary story podcasts and YouTube videos. We went from the No Sleep podcast to the X-Files and ended up on a Swamp Dweller video dealing with Native American lore. I'm half paying attention, petting my dog, playing Pokemon on the emulator. I hear the narrator mention Wendigos. Very briefly says what they are and casually mentions they can mimic voices. I mean, when I say I was freaked out about last year, I got even more freaked out. The most horrible chills I have ever had in my life crawl down my spine, and I stare at my boyfriend and ask him if he remembers that national forest I was freaked out about last year. He says he does, and he reminds me that he texted me I was probably close to a Wendigo, and he did say that. I remember him saying that, but didn't know much about their lore and thought he was just being funny, like yeah, Bigfoot is probably stalking you or some other dad joke. He was like, no, I mean I was mostly joking, but I said it specifically because you said you were hearing voices that you couldn't find a trace of. I feel strange and I start googling Wendigos, etc, etc. They are allegedly able to mimic human voices, and they would live in that sort of area. It all matched up. Obviously there's a ton of questionable info out there, but I tried to find more reputable websites and authentic experiences. I have done a lot of solo traveling both in and out of the country, and I have never had such a bad feeling on top of seeing an unnecessary amount of dead animals in a national forest, which just seems strange. I don't think I'll be doing any more solo traveling unless it's around civilization. I wanted to share something that happened to me and my girlfriend around 2 years ago. We were both in our late 20s at the time. Thinking about this still makes my skin crawl and my heart pound. Sorry if it's a bit long. I want to set the scene appropriately. We camped for the night in the Stanislaus National Forest near Big Trees, California. We were only about 15 minutes off the main road, but in a pretty remote area. Basically dirt fire back roads and nothing but trees in all directions. We arrived in the early afternoon and set up camp in a nice clearing at the top of a hill beside the road. We drank some beer while we cooked dinner. We saw maybe 4 cars go by in the hours between when we arrived in nightfall. All hunters leaving the forest. By 7, the sun had mostly set and it was getting dark. The solitude and peacefulness of the woods were nice, but it felt just a little odd being so secluded. I've been camping probably 50 times, but I've always been with a larger group or at a dedicated campsite. After dinner, when it was dark, we hung a bear bag with all of our food stuff and smoked a joint laying back on a blanket looking up at the stars. I was feeling good and pretty much forgot about the fact that we were alone in the middle of a big forest. We got into the tent and sat in the darkness and talked for at least an hour. I'm a tall guy, but my 2-man tent is high enough that I could sit up inside without much of a problem. The rainfly was laying on top of the tent, kinda flung over on the top and not attached or staked down, fully covering one side and draped over so that the other side was mostly unobscured. We had a very clear view of the mesh siding of the trees and barely illuminated by the moon in front of us. Here's where it got spooky. I had been doing a lot of browsing of Reddit and decided to tell my girl about a blog I follow. Basically, a blog dedicated to this spooky ritual where you can sit in a darkened room at 3 a.m. and set up a candle and 2 mirrors. Through some combination of supernatural forces and sleep deprivation, images appear in the mirrors and speak to you. I was having fun scaring her and, to be honest, was scaring myself a little bit. My hair is standing on end as I recall this. The woods were dead silent, and there was absolutely no wind. Nothing rustling, no air moving at all. It would have been very, very easy to feel even the slightest breeze sitting like we were. I paused in my story, and as I did, the rainfly started to ever so slowly draw back from the top of the tent. It didn't fall off, and it wasn't blown. Honest to God, it was as if someone was carefully pulling it down from behind us. I will never forget the sound it made. We turned and stared at each other wide-eyed, and my heart was in my throat. The fly continued to slide ever so slowly down the tent until it was completely off. It was too dark to see clearly behind us, but my mind was frozen. It was conjuring all these nightmarish beings that I've seen in horror movies. I'd like to say I sprang into action and ensured our safety, but I was literally frozen in fear. What a feeling that was. We sat in stunned silence for maybe 10 seconds until I finally found it within myself to grab my flashlight and look behind us. The weirdest part was, there was nothing there. We breathed a huge sigh and started whispering feverishly. What the heck? Did you? I got out and looked all around the clearing, but felt stupid after a while and we went to sleep. The next morning we woke up early and packed up camp. It was sunny and quiet, and I was happy to be in the woods, but I couldn't shake the eerie feeling from the night before. I was on my knees rolling up the tent, but kept glancing through the trees around us kind of compulsively, and my girlfriend was pacing and packing up breakfast about 30 feet in front of me. Again, there was absolutely nobody around, and no birds chirping or animals in sight. Then I heard from directly behind me 2 quick wood knocks. They were loud at about 2 seconds apart, like the sound of an axe hitting a tree. I judged the source of the sound was within 100 feet of us. My girlfriend sprang up as I wheeled around and looked behind me, but there was nothing seemingly there. We both said, "Okay, time to get out of here," and left in a hurry. My heart didn't stop pounding until we were back on the main road. I have never been so thoroughly spooked for such an extended period in my life. I hope this story was interesting to some of you. Let me know if you have any ideas of what could have been out there with us that day. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true National Forest stories. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button, as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it's a national forest story or something completely different, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. If you're unaware, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories on iTunes, Spotify, and every other major podcast platform. We have just one day left on our fundraiser to help the Amazon rainforest. If you would like to donate, you can do so by using the link that you can find on the side of the video or under the video. It is greatly appreciated, and any help is amazing. If you made it to the end of the video, as always, be sure to comment this code word, Jumping Lima Beans. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.